Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm your boss, Joe Boss. Nice to see you in the chat, Ari. Thank you very much for hopping in. I'm sure we'll be able to hang out in Discord in just a bit, but I'm gonna try and keep up doing the streams just as frequently as I can. I skipped doing the stream yesterday because I needed time to actually edit videos. So I posted like, I don't know, 20 shorts and 2 videos yesterday. And I'm just going to keep up the frequency with the streams now that I don't have any other issues that are preventing that on the productivity side. And we'll get some automatic highlights for the stream going forward and just get those out onto shorts. And then every now and again, get like a couple of short videos out. That'd be fun. That'd be very, very, very fun to do. But for now, what I want to do is actually get into the charts. And by charts, I actually mean, okay, don't get me wrong, I have geopolitical notes. I have updates on all of the Islamic Republic's rule of Iran thread, the Iran commodities thread, one bit of updates on the Kurds, the Slovak-Ukraine oil dispute thread, the Russia-Ukraine war thread, the Cuba thread, Mexican drug war and cartel war thread. Is like, I got updates on all these things. And especially for the commodities side of stuff for Operation Epic Fury. Which is why we have oil open right off the rip. Because this has been absolutely insane. So the movement from here to all the way up here is Operation Epic Fury. So oil rose 72, close to 73% over the course of about a week and a half-ish. And so why has it fallen off a cliff? Why have things started to reverse? Now, I set an expectation over, I don't know, over the weekend especially. Was quite explicit over the weekend that either oil was going to fall and take a big hit going into this week, or you would have seen this move just in the opposite direction of going to like 150 oil prices. The reason is because of storage capacity at all these countries. So all these countries in the Gulf, they have oil production and natural gas production. They can only produce so much before they have to store it, or they have to offload it into an oil tanker or a nat gas tanker so they can ship it and take it where it needs to be. What ended up happening with Operation Epic Fury is the Iranians, after they were attacked, started attacking all the other Gulf countries. And when those Gulf countries started getting hit, they started getting concerned, seriously concerned, about their oil infrastructure getting hit as well. So many countries, especially Qatar, shut off liquefied natural gas facilities, and a few others also shut off. The Saudis shut off quite a lot of facilities as well. But every country has a different amount of storage capacity. The Iraqis were hit by Iran, and they only had about a week worth of storage. So they've had to shut off like a few million barrels worth of production, if I remember correctly. Or they at least shut off 1 million barrels worth of production. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. And then the Saudis shut off some stuff. The Qatar, he's right, they shut off those LNG facilities. But not only that, it wasn't just oil and nat gas, but it's also fertilizer. About a third, I believe, of the world's fertilizer comes from these Gulf countries. So food prices for many, many different assets have started to rise. In fact, in a handful of the streams that I did over the weekend, I brought up assets like coffee. If we go to the futures for a bunch of foods, so this is soybeans. Soybeans have risen pretty well over the last few days, but they rose quite significantly going into Operation Epic Fury. And look, it has the exact same move down as oil does here. What's another one? Let's see. That's whole milk powder. That's not going to be impacted. Coffee. Here's coffee. And then here's the rise in coffee. And then now here's the fall we're seeing afterwards. The coffee seems to be a bit more normalized because that one is more spread out globally. The supply of coffee is a lot more global. But particularly for soybeans, this was the big one I saw in the agriculture side that was impacted. And it's still going up a bit here. It's still doing quite well. I'll just be frank. I don't know too much about soybeans. And then coffee, this is cocoa. Cocoa is just getting impacted due to issues with getting freight through the Red Sea at the moment because it's still considered an active war zone. So freights for a lot of commodities are going up. There is speculation this is going to impact inflation, but it really does depend on how long this goes on for. Because if these agricultural commodities are only going up for a month, then it's no problem. However, if we're talking about this, right? If we're talking about fertilizer, where is the fertilizer? Yeah, there we go. So this is the price of fertilizer. Again, roughly a third of the world's fertilizer come from these same countries. And right now, if I readjust this to the current price, from the start of Operation Epic Fury, urea, which is I believe the nitrogen that goes into fertilizer, is up 25%. Now, if you are doing agricultural commodities, you need fertilizer. So when fertilizer goes up, the cost of agriculture also goes up. And when the cost of agriculture goes up, then the cost of food goes up. When the cost of food goes up, the consumer inflation metrics for food go up. And that brings up the headline consumer price index. So this has yet to come down. There might be spikes in inflation, sure, due to some commodity prices related to energy going higher, but I think there could be some extra sticky inflation that comes over the next couple of months from fertilizer if fertilizer doesn't also come down lower, because a 25% price increase here is kind of insane. And you can look at nat gas too. Nat gas is huge for Europe, and it hasn't come down nearly as cleanly as oil has. It's still on the upside here. And that's also because those Qatari liquefied natural gas facilities I'm talking about, once you turn them off, at least what Qatar says is once you turn them off and you take all of the workers out of those facilities, to get everyone back to work, it's not like a 2-week thing, apparently, to safely run down the facility to get it to produce either really, really low amounts or just to turn it off. Because look, if a bomb or a drone hit these facilities, you'd have all this gas going everywhere, and it's highly, highly explosive and flammable. So obviously, they want these facilities to be completely shut down for safety reasons. And then they want to get everyone out, get all their workers out, because they don't want anyone in these facilities, these explosive facilities, to potentially get killed if there is an attack. So in order to ramp up these facilities that have now been turned off to get them turned back on again, I don't know if it's going to take a whole month, but I would give it like 2 weeks, right? That would be my expectation. Give it 2 weeks, and the LNG will probably be back. But I also genuinely wouldn't be surprised if it took them like 5 or 6 weeks. Just I don't know enough about running up and running down, scaling up and scaling down the output of LNG facilities to know the speed at which you can really do these things well. But from what I am seeing, I'd expect. I'm not expecting the LNG facilities in Qatar, which are the major ones, to come back online anytime in the next 2 weeks. So natural gas is going to stay sticky, and at least intermittently, which will show up for March inflation in the April report for all the European countries. All these European countries that use natural gas need to pay these really high prices. It's going to go and impact their manufacturing inflation and their consumer inflation significantly. It's not gonna. I don't imagine it impact the services all that much, but it will definitely impact manufacturing and consumer retail nat gas use. Other than that, so just to kind of sum up, my main concerns going forward really isn't oil here. I feel like oil has very likely topped off at this point, and we can go into the Iran commodities research thread, and let me just make sure that music's we can go into the Iran commodities thread and look at the research on what people are seeing, how ships are actually going through the Strait of Hormuz, and a bunch of these oil facilities are actually able to offload oil into tankers. They're not having to store it inland. In fact, what they're doing is the oil that they had to store in tankers during the first week, inland tankers, are now being pumped and moved to afloat tankers that are out at sea, to then go through the strait. So tankers in the Gulf, in the Persian Gulf, are currently being filled, and we know that because the inland oil inventories are being brought down. And unless they're literally dumping it like milk in Canada, which is a kind of a sad thing to see sometimes when you have all these cows producing all this milk, and farmers are told by the government that they have to dump so much milk, so much milk as a form of price control. And I seriously doubt that even just for environmental reasons alone and environmental regulations alone, that these countries are dumping oil. And that would be maybe one explanation for why oil inventories could be going down. Could be, but I doubt that's the actual answer. It seems much more reasonable that there are afloat tankers that are getting filled up. And there's a couple other things going on. Actually, we can go right on into it. There was... Let me just go here. Okay. And then where is it? And then we're going to exit full screen here. Move this guy over to the other side. Yeah, Goldman Sachs, some oil is moving through the Strait of Hormuz. So estimated oil exports through the Strait of Hormuz based on vessel count. And this is percent of normal and then million barrels per day. So we're talking 5-ish million barrels per day, and it's about 20% of normal. Vessel count as percent of normal is based on an average S&P and Kepler data on the daily number of oil tankers crossing the Strait of Hormuz relative to January 1st to February 14th average. Flows are estimated by applying this proportion to assumed normal flows. So yesterday, oil had begun flowing through the Strait of Hormuz, again, based on vessel count. That's what Goldman Sachs found out. And Goldman Sachs also issued price targets. Goldman Sachs long-term oil price call with no uncertainty on the length of the conflict. The fair value for Brent WTI could still be $66 a barrel in the fourth quarter if Strait of Hormuz flows start recovering gradually this week. And that's pretty in line with what expectations were for oil prices before Operation Epic Fury began, which was that oil would essentially float around $60. So these are, we can full screen this. These are different prices. Actually, we can maybe do something more along these lines. These are different prices based on scenarios. So length of the disruption for the Strait of Hormuz flows down 90%. So this is for Brent and this is for WTI. Brent is on the left, WTI is on the right. So right here, 10 days base case. And this seems to be where we're currently at, which is saying, okay, $66 a barrel is what to expect if the strait is only closed for 10 days. If it's closed for 3 weeks, $71 seems to be what's expected. 30 days, 76. It's only once you go past 30 days that you start running into issues with storage. A lot of facilities and a lot of countries in the Middle East, in the Gulf, that are trying to export oil and gas have enough capacity inland to store production for about 2 to 3 weeks. At the end of this week is that 2-week period. So if the strait isn't open and beginning to be opened, which is what I expected, because if it doesn't happen, you end up with this growth. Same thing over here. You end up with this growth in WTI for 10, 21, 30, 60 days, assuming that the disruption stays on for longer. Now, with that all said and done, we can go on to this thing. There's still a lot of GPS spoofing. Let's see here. I'm looking for I believe this is it. Yeah. Very interesting data point. Every Gulf monarchies have drawn inland inventories in the past week. Excuse me, I had a burp. Knowing that the export activity is near zero, this confirms the crude was moved, or say that crude was moved into afloat storage, and that the production was trimmed aggressively. So I'll just read this because it looks like it's going to be too small for you guys to read. United Arab Emirates inventory. So this is a chart of how much is actually in their inventory. Actually, we have to open this in a new tab here. And then we can scroll to the right. Yeah. And then so right here is what we're dealing with. Inventory going straight down. That little tiny thing all the way to the right of stream. And then these are the dates for latest update. UAE percent filled, 3%. And then the Saudis are 54% full. Iran is also about 50% full. Month over month is down 7 million barrels. Yeah. Yeah, so the amount of oil stored inland for Oman, for Iran, for Saudi Arabia, and for the UAE is going down by 3 million barrels, by about 3 million barrels, 3 million barrels there, and 2 million barrels there. So about 3 to 2 million barrels is what all these countries are stopping. And then this is Salma Cargiano. He's just saying, hey, watch out. You know, if you're using GPS tracking still to track if ships are moving through the Strait of Hormuz, there's still a lot of GPS spoofing going on. So GPS data still isn't really reliable quite yet. The amount of spoofing is still significant. Let's see here. Oh, hello, Ani. I have just seen the notification. That's why I'm a little, yeah. You know, I'm doing an early stream again. Doing a nice early stream again. I mean, I could go from here and talk about. Actually, there is one theme I do want to hit on, because alongside the commentary I've been giving on the Strait of Hormuz, Operation Epic Fury, and the Persian Gulf, all these things, and the expectations that the Gulf would reopen this week, I've been always pretty much dead set on that. Otherwise, I set the expectation that if the Gulf did not open, that we would be in for a quite significant energy crisis. I'm still feeling pretty confident that the Gulf is going to open. We just showed that oil is starting to flow through the Gulf again for the first time in quite a while. But there is another thesis that I want to put my finger on and say this is important to watch. And it mostly has to do with the Russia-Ukraine war And the theme I would like to call the theater pivot. The theater pivot is when the idea that the U.S. armed forces will rotate their forces from Operation Epic Fury once the operation is complete and stay in the Middle East, but slightly reposition closer to Europe and potentially go into the European theater, into European countries, or go into Ukraine itself. And that rotation from the Middle East to the European theater, the front with Russia and Ukraine, is a real risk. Now, it seems like Trump does not want to actually send the military there. After watching some commentary from his press conference and also some of the commentary from Putin after Trump's commentary came out, Trump and Putin had a phone call, and Putin still wants to be involved in the trilateral meeting. Zelensky still wants the trilateral meeting. In fact, we can listen to what they have to say here.
With President Putin, we had a lot of people on the line from our side, from his side. We were talking about Ukraine, which is just a never-ending fight. And look, there's tremendous hatred between President Putin and President Zelensky. They can't seem to get it together. But I think it was a positive call on that subject. And we obviously talked then about the Middle East. And he wants to be helpful. I said, you could be more helpful by getting the Ukraine-Russia war over with. That would be more helpful. But we had a very good talk, and he wants to be very constructive. I had a very good call with President.
Okay, so that's what Trump had to say about his call with Putin. So Trump, excuse me, just took the bite of my thing. So that was Trump's side of the conversation. This, I found, is actually a transcript from the Russian side of that phone call. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin discussed a number of extremely important issues. I should say right away that the conversation was businesslike, frank, and constructive in nature, and is usually the case in dialogue between Russian and American leaders. The U.S. president noted that, as had been agreed earlier, such communication should, of course, take place on a regular basis. The last time they talked was in December. For his part, President Trump gave his assessment of the situation in the context of the ongoing U.S. operation in Iran. There was, I think, a very substantive and useful exchange of views on this matter. Trump once again expressed interest in ending the conflict in Ukraine as soon as possible by reaching a ceasefire and achieving long-term settlement. From our side, the Russian side, positive assessment was given to the effort being made and the steps currently being taken under the leadership of Trump. Okay. That's that. That's from the Russians. Now, let's hear what Zelensky has to say. He has this huge post and a video here of him talking with apparently some military leaders, some cabinet leaders. I don't know those people by name, but that was the video attached to the statement. I held a meeting with our negotiating team. It is important that we are in communication with the American side virtually 24/7. At the moment, the partners' priority and all attention are focused on the situation around Iran. And because of this, the meeting that had been planned, the trilateral meeting in Abu Dhabi, that had been planned for this week, is being postponed at the proposal of the American side. However, Ukraine is ready for a meeting at any moment. And then, I have instructed the team to once again communicate with the American negotiators in order, first, to reiterate our readiness for strategic joint work for security. And then also providing drones to the Middle East. And then once again being ready to work substantively toward ending Russia's war against Ukraine. And then, let's see here. And then they say Russians are trying to manipulate the situation in the Middle East and the Gulf, which is kind of hilarious because Zelensky is himself going to the Middle Eastern countries and saying, we will help you defend against Iran's drone attacks if you promise to help garner a ceasefire with the Russians, if you help us with the negotiations against the Russians. We'll give you anti-drone defense weapons. Yeah, evil must not be given opportunities for coordination, but the protection of life must be clearly coordinated. This is exactly what we are working for. Thank you to everyone. So that was Zelensky. So we got all the sides of the story, and we have their official statements. We listened to what Trump said about the phone call. We listened to what the Russians said about the phone call. And now this is Zelensky's side of things. Putin did make a statement again following up that he wants to potentially now actually move forward with pulling nat gas out of Europe. But I'm not too sure if this will end up being the case, because there have been some relaxation of the sanctions against the Russians, and I'll see you later, Ari. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for stopping by. It's very, very late for Ari right now. Very, very late for him. But yes, thank you so much, Ari, for sticking by. But yeah, we went over this a while ago. Putin and some reporter were just talking with each other, and Putin was saying, well, maybe we will, maybe we won't. In about a month, the Europeans aren't going to be taking in any oil, and Putin was just saying, oh, why wait? Why not just stop sending them the oil now? Which would have caused a lot more strain on Europe economically, going into the reduced supply that's occurred after Operation Epic Fury. So it's one way of putting a little bit more economic pressure on the Europeans. And just like how the rest of the world, a lot of the world, can't really put China in that bucket, but how a lot of the world is sanctioning and pressuring Russia economically in order to dissuade it from being apart from continuing the war against Ukraine. Same thing with the Russians saying, well, maybe you don't need this energy from us, really. And that puts economic strain on Europe. However, I don't think even if the oil that Russia, or the nat gas that Russia is threatening to yank about a month early ahead of schedule from Europe, that it would make that big of a deal financially. Because the Europeans are trying to find every which way around right now Viktor Orban, who's objecting to a $90 billion euro, 90 billion euros in military aid to Ukraine. So Ursula is working around, trying to figure out how to get around Orban. The Prime Minister of Poland has also been very outspoken about it, communicating how they can get this 90 billion euro package through to Ukraine. 27 EU members have already approved of it. But for this money to go through, it would have just been easier if Orban had said yes, but there's an issue right now. There's kind of two issues. Orban is very sympathetic with the Russians. He doesn't want Ukraine to be at war with Russia, and he's more sympathetic with the Russians. That's just true. However, Orban has somewhat bigger issue, my opinion, and that is he is a landlocked country, and he has to negotiate oil deals for his country to come through pipelines that originate in other countries. So up until January 27th of this year, 2026, Hungary was getting their oil from Russia through pipelines that were moving through Ukraine. And the pipelines were actually hit and blown up. So we can go here and listen to what Orban has to say about it. So I'm going to put him on a very, very low volume. I'm just going to read the English transcriptions here at the bottom. But first, he's calling it the Ukrainian oil blockade. Today, I wrote the president of President Costa and von der Leyen saying that the review and suspension of sanctions to review the suspensions on Russian energy. It's just the United States did suspend Russian sanctions for India for 1 month because India was going to get hit really, really hard economically. So for 1 month, all that oil that was just kind of sitting there is now actually being sent to India, and India is buying it. So a lot of oil is already getting purchased from the Russians by India because of the United States lifting that sanction temporarily for a month. Now, the European Union already has an exemption for Hungary and Slovakia to purchase Russian oil. They already have this exemption. But the pipeline that goes through Ukraine that Orban is saying is blocked, very likely, I think, is blocked suddenly. Orban says that there's satellite pictures showing that the pipeline is completely operational and totally fine. And Zelensky says it was bombed. It's not fully operational. But then when Slovakia and Hungary go and say, hey, we want to actually send inspectors there because we don't necessarily trust you, Zelensky. Zelensky then, apparently it's either Zelensky or a department of the Ukrainian government says, no, you cannot send your own independent inspectors to view the damage or the condition of the Ukrainian pipeline. Now, when that pipeline got turned off, essentially an oil energy crisis began for Hungary and Slovakia. But it wasn't all for naught, because those two countries can still get their oil through Croatia, through the Adriatic Sea and the Adian pipeline. But the Croatians are saying that for every single Russian vessel that goes through, or every single vessel that's offloading Russian crude oil through Croatia and then to Hungary and Slovakia, because now that's pretty much the only route now that the Ukrainian one is offline. In order to do that, the Croatians are saying, well, we want you to get permits for this oil. And, right off the bat, the Hungarians and the Slovakians are like, okay, we kind of already have an exemption for purchasing this oil from the European Union. So why do we need permits? But not just that. The Croatians then said, well, you actually need permits to receive this oil for every single shipment. So every single boat and every single tanker that has Russian oil in it to supply these inland countries, Hungary and Slovakia, through Croatia. Croatia wants every single ship to have a permit. At least that's what it says on the Wikipedia page. That's kind of a big deal. However, what I will say also is that the Croatian president seems to be friendly with the Ukrainians, and he also has been siding with in the votes in the European Union to get Ukraine that 90 billion euro military funding aid package. So obviously and it's not just the permits, by the way. The Wikipedia page also mentions that the Croatians were charging supposedly were charging more to send the oil through their pipeline to Hungary and Slovakia. But I have a feeling it's not like it potentially could be an oil transport fee or a fee to use the pipeline that they're charging. But I have a feeling that it's because Russian oil is most of the price difference comes from Russian oil just being so significantly cheaper at the moment versus getting oil from the rest of the world. So if you get oil from the rest of the world, Croatia says, Hungary, if you want to get oil from the United States, or you want to get oil from Saudi Arabia, then by all means, go ahead, purchase that oil and no permits needed. We can just go ahead and take that oil and run it through the pipeline. However, I did also read that apparently that pipeline for Croatia was made for the Urals, which is the Russian type of oil. So I don't know enough about oil pipelines to say whether or not oil pipelines have to support specific types of oil, because there's sweet and sour crude. So I don't know enough about oil pipelines to say definitively at the moment, like whether or not you have to have a Urals pipeline and then, a semi-sweet pipeline, right? Like pipelines for different types of crude. I don't know I know you just can't put all the crude in one single pipe, because then all the different types of crude oil will end up mixing. And then at the end of the pipe, you're going to get this weird mix and slosh that nobody wants. So it makes sense that one pipeline would usually just take one type of oil, or at least something like extremely similar to it. So if the Croatian pipeline was mostly to transport Urals, which is the Russian oil, well, maybe the increase in fees is to do maintenance on the pipeline after, let's say, moving Saudi oil through the line, or moving US oil or Canadian oil through the pipeline. So there are extra fees, and then also that oil does cost more from those other countries. So Hungary and Slovakia have not just they have a serious financial incentive to try and get the Russian oil. But remember, at the very beginning, the EU already granted Hungary and Slovakia exemptions to receive this oil. Now, maybe there's something legally going on because the exemptions were given to Hungary and Slovakia, and the Croatians are the ones transporting it, and they weren't maybe explicitly given that exemption. But it also says in the law that people transporting the oil are safe, from what I understand, from breaking any rules in the EU about transporting sanctioned oil, except for those who exemptions have been made for. That's my understanding. But yeah, I mean, I just kind of explained the whole situation. I don't necessarily know we need to listen to Orban, but considering I want to emphasize going to first party sources, like what we did with listening to Trump and Putin, or at least someone in Putin's foreign affairs, responsible for Russian foreign affairs, and Zelensky directly when it came down to the recent set of phone calls about when they wanted to do their next trilateral meeting. When it comes down to these types of geopolitical events, it is best to listen directly to the heads of state of each respective country. Because news, a lot of news will really exaggerate. You know, they'll take something like, you know, I think grapes are a pretty good food. And the news will say, Joe Boss thinks grapes are the best fruit in the world. So much so, he hates apples. And it's like, well, I didn't say that second half. And that's not how the way you described me liking grapes is not the way I actually described my preference. I was not that enthusiastic about grapes, even though I like grapes, right? So the sensationalizing of headlines and stories in order to get people to click are clickbait. And I still see it all over X. I still see it all over these different websites and whatnot. And the sooner you come to the realization that that's just their business, the sooner you move on to doing this kind of research, going directly to these governments, going to more independent journalists, independent reporters that will do higher quality research, that will do much more due diligence before doing a report. And, you know, they might sensationalize things a bit, but in order to entice you to click on something, but they're not going to sensationalize to the point where it's clickbait, right? They're not going to sensationalize to the point that it's a clickbait. So let's listen to what Orban has to say and give him the due time like we have to all the other heads of state we've listened to so far today. Due to the Ukrainian oil blockade, I said I would read these, and the war in the Middle East, the price of crude oil has begun to rise explosively in Hungary. In this situation, the Ukrainian oil blockade introduced by Zelensky poses the most serious threat possible not only to Hungary and Slovakia, but to the entire European Union. I don't know about that. To avert the danger, two decisions are needed. Across Europe, we must review and suspend all sanctions imposed on Russian energy. Not happening. Today, I initiated this in a letter to Commission President von Leyen. We must prevent the price of diesel and petrol from rising to an unbearable level. To this end, I have conveyed an extraordinary team. Now it's just, the price of crude oil has begun to rise explosively in Hungary as well. In this situation, the Ukrainian oil blockade introduced... Oh, it already looped. Wow. Okay. I didn't even notice that it looped. Oh, excuse me. So yeah, that's what Orban had to say. Now, I have a whole lot more stuff. I have stuff on Cuba. There's protests going on, right? There's people flipping over cars in Cuba. And there's the police right there. there's much more serious unrest in Cuba occurring, and it's because there are more serious talks. There was a bit here at the press conference today from Trump. There was a Trump talked about Cuba at its press conference today.
But you said that Cuba wants to make a deal.
Yes.
What would the United States get in return for that, and why should Americans trust Marco Rubio to negotiate it?
Well, Marco Rubio is doing a great job. I think he's going to go down as the greatest Secretary of State in history. Look at what we've done as a presidency. Look at what we've done as an administration. They trust Marco.
The Cubans
and so
trust him.
The American people trust. He's been successful no matter where he's been. He also speaks the language, which is always nice and always helpful. But he's dealing, and it may be a friendly takeover. It may not be a friendly takeover. It wouldn't matter, because they're down to, as they say, fumes. They have no energy. They have no money. They're in deep trouble on a humanitarian basis. And we don't want to see that, but they were very, very bad to a lot of people, as you know, and a lot of people living the Cuban-American vote, which I got at record levels. Very important. Those people are very important to me. I know what they went through. They went through hell. Some of them have gone on to be some of the most successful people in the country. Cuban-American business people, some of them are like the most successful in the country. And a lot of them are friends of mine, because I've been fighting this battle with them for a long time. The Castro regime was brutal, but they lived off Venezuela. Now they don't live off Venezuela. Sends them no energy, no fuel, no oil, no money, no nothing. They lived without Venezuela. They couldn't have made it. And we cut them off from everything else. So, they're going to make either a deal, or we'll do it just as easy anyway.
So that's what Trump said on Cuba. Cuba is definitely on the chopping block after Operation Epic Fury. That seems to be extremely well telegraphed, almost as well telegraphed as the military buildup that was occurring leading into Operation Epic Fury. There's... I have a whole bunch of updates on Iran, like the new Ayatollah, and how the new Ayatollah is the last Ayatollah's son, and how he was supposedly bombed, and because there's now reports that he's unconscious and isn't making any appearances right now. He is reportedly unconscious after an assassination attempt. Israel has already publicized a new list of Iranian leaders on the chopping block to receive the cruise missile version of Ding Dong Ditch. It's pretty nuts. Yeah. So they already have the new list, and this is the Ayatollah's son, first name on that list. Pretty big deal here. Let's, for now, I'd like to get back to the charts. I have a bunch of notes, but it's like, we've already been going on for an hour. We went over a handful of charts here, but I'd like to, let's say, go over euro dollar, some currencies. We had some nice bounce backs. And by nice bounce backs, I mean I'm back in the green on this trade. I did not stop out of this trade because I was extremely certain it would work out, especially after the reports that oil started to flow through. And then, oil fell from 120 down to $80 again. So the reversal occurred on the dollar, but if you go to the DXY, it's just this big fat top wick. I want to actually check out on this. Yeah, check that out. Well, that's probably the top for the month. Let's turn on the timing dots. Increase this just a tad. Yeah, there we go. So if this is in fact the top for the month, where do we end up going down to? And it seems like there's a big spread of dots, but around here, around 96 seems to be the spot in the second half of the month. Now, if this is the low for the month, there's a lot more places we can go up higher on. But this would require the straight to effectively close again. And I do not know if, especially other Middle Eastern countries would allow that. Iran has said that they did not mean to launch all those attacks against all of the other Middle Eastern countries. I find that very hard to believe. Extremely hard to believe. I don't take it at face value at all. I think it's just an outright lie that it wasn't planned by the Iranians, because it was such a massive wave and sporadic attack on everyone indiscriminately when Iran was hit. Now, is it going to be a problem going forward if Iran doesn't keep their promise now that they will not attack Middle Eastern countries going forward, so long they're not retaliated against? I hope so. I really do. More so for the Iranians. Because the rest of the Middle East is already building new defense alliances together in order to contain Iran. Pakistan and Saudi Arabia met and had a meeting to discuss joint on-the-ground defense cooperation between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, between their countries. I don't know exactly how far you can throw that stone. I'd imagine Middle Easterners can actually throw stones pretty well, but okay, that's a pretty bad joke. Oh no. I can imagine Middle Easterners can throw stones pretty well. However, Saudi Arabia, while it's definitely close to Iran, it doesn't have the same capabilities border-wise as Pakistan does. The country that's most similar would be Iraq, as far as border control goes with Iran. But Pakistan and Saudi Arabia are now working together jointly on containing Iran. So long Iran actually keeps their word and doesn't launch any more attacks on other Middle Eastern countries, and especially on their oil infrastructure or on their tankers sitting in the Persian Gulf, then things will continue to recover as they have today. And they will continue to recover over the next several days, and things will ramp up slowly. But my expectation is we will not go back to the capacity that we were at, the output that we were at, for quite some time, until it's much more certain, until shippers can be much more certain, and these Middle Eastern countries can be much more certain that Iran will not send another few hundred drones or 50 missiles in any which way possible. They want to know that the Islamic Republic is not going to be launching attacks at all. A lot of these countries are kind of on board with the United States right now for a complete dismantling of the Islamic Republic and getting a new government put in for Iran. A lot of them are. Actually, ironically, Pakistan is not in favor of regime change, even though they just met up with the Saudis to discuss a containment protocol for Iran. And that's just one more thing I hope that the United States understands, is that you just don't want, if you're going to have a successful regime change, you don't want the other countries around Iran meddling in the transitory government and making it, doing essentially what Cuba did actually in Venezuela, where all of the intelligence for Cuba, a lot of the intelligence for Cuba, a lot of the intelligence apparatus for Venezuela was run by Cubans and people in the Cuban government. Same with Nicolas Maduro's bodyguards. They were Cubans. So in Venezuela, there was a huge discussion about essentially being captured by the Cubans, that the government was captured by the Cubans because they are in the most important parts of the Venezuelan government. And so when the United States came in and took Maduro and they killed a bunch of Cubans, and then there was regime change in Venezuela, they also kicked the rest of the Cubans out of their intelligence roles. Then you had the rest of the United States come through. Now diplomatic relations are reopened. All of the companies are now back in Venezuela. You're not going to end up with the same thing in Iran if all these other countries, as the government is transitioning to something new, all these other countries are coming in and effectively trying to be what Cuba was to Venezuela, and then be that for Iran. We really don't want that, because that's just going to make things take much, much longer in getting a stable and steady state for Iran. And truth is, I do not have a crystal ball. So it would be very, very nice if someone who did have a crystal ball could tell me how this is all going to turn out. But it doesn't seem like it will turn out well unless there's a strong presence by someone to step up for some transitory government in Iran. But then there's other things to consider as well, right? Which is, what about all the people who are still have a super high allegiance to the Ayatollah? What to do about them? And that's where people argue that you need a ground force to go in to contain them and to suppress the violent revolutionary sides that want to maintain the Islamic Republic. Iran's not going to have an easy time, is my expectation, with finding out what to do next. But the sooner Iran stops shooting missiles and drones at their neighbors, the sooner the Strait of Hormuz will reopen, and it will take a while to get to capacity, and it's likely going to take maybe a bit longer than most people expect, because we do not know exactly how long it will take for Iran to stabilize and even set up a transitory government to get the next best leader, right? We just don't know. And it's okay to be uncertain, especially with trading and geopolitics and all this stuff. It's okay to be uncertain. In fact, it's better if you are uncertain about something to just explicitly state, I don't know. It's 100,000% better. If you don't know, then guess what? Maybe someone who does know hears that, steps up, raises their hand, and says, "Hey, this is what you have to know to actually be competent in this part of the world, to understand how this might develop." Or, here's what I think. Maybe it's not the right thing, but it's my opinion. It's how I view the world. Which is why, even though I have my own biases and my own worldview, I very, very proactively go out of my way to look at what the world, all the parties involved are saying. There's people I vehemently disagree with politically, but I still follow them on X because they still do good research. People can always have their personal bias and expectations, but nobody makes money in trading if you're setting up your expectations on something that never materializes, that never realizes. If you are setting expectations that perpetually and continuously always fail to realize effectively, then you're not going to be making any money. So the people who are good at setting trading expectations, it's kind of independent of your political beliefs. It has more to do with how good your research is and how closely you can get to what the actual truth of the matter is. And then even if there's fake information that comes out, how you respond to that information once it's revealed that some prior piece of information was fake. How do you respond to that? Do you know what assets you're supposed to change in your portfolio given this new information that some critical thing that you were basing a lot of very expensive trades on turned out to be false? That, you could say, reactivity, that reflexivity is really important to have, right? Staying very nimble. Okay. So that was a very good rant. Very, very, very good rant. We can look at the rest of these assets here. We can look at things for the rest of the week. I wouldn't be surprised if dollar did continue to weaken. Now, it looks like Aussie is already at the tail of a distribution. It could potentially go even higher. I also did some trades on Euro CAD. I don't think I bought this bottom wick, but man, isn't that so obvious when you see this green peak, right? When you see this big fat green peak in the histogram, this is where the lows are most likely to occur for a week on Euro CAD. It's like, let's say you just did something conservative. It's up 130 pips, 140 pips right now. And then here's dollar CAD. We just looked at this, but from here to here is another 93 pips. If it continues moving lower, if the volume going through the Strait of Hormuz continues to pick up, then this should continue to go lower. Things get a bit more risk on. And then you have euro dollar, and you can see that has performed quite well as well. This was up 118 pips on the day, but because I was already exposed, because I got long here, held through this drawdown, held through this gap down, I did take a trade on the long side here on Euro CAD, and maybe I can mark it up now on the stream. Now that I got myself here. So let's mark it up. Go to activity. And that was March 8th. Yeah, so right here. and the price was 1.6567. Cool. Yeah, so I bought the rebound after making this low. Right here, it went, I think I was buying it there. Anyways, I went long. I then saw this candle. I'm like, oh man, I could have bought like 20 pips lower. And then it just kept going, and I was very, very happy to see it kept going. So now I would like to see the move on the month continue higher. I am not sure if this will end up being the low for the month, but I am totally prepared to just get that. There's only a handful of tops that have occurred given this low. But if we also look at this top here, so assuming this is the top for the month, we don't go past this high made right at the open. A lot of lows for the month are made right around here, right around here, right around these prices. So looking at the dots and looking at the ranges, I feel quite secure and also looking at the geopolitical situation and while continuing to monitor it, especially the two main things that I'm watching geopolitically as true measures of what's actually going on is the amount of missile and drone launches out of Iran and the amount of crude oil going through the strait. The big thing that really rebounded prices was it was the first time in 4 or 5 days that crude started moving through the Strait of Hormuz again. And now we just have to see if that number starts creeping up higher and if the political situation in Iran continues to stabilize, or if it does destabilize, how are the missiles and the drone strikes being conducted? Because that's the primary risk. That's why insurance is so high for all these tankers. And that's what determines how much fuel goes through the Strait of Hormuz. Okay. So there's one trade for me. There's one trade right there. We can look at the yens, but we can move out of FX now. I am very happy to see Bitcoin is back above 70K again. Very, very, very happy to see. And so far so good. It seems like for now, Bitcoin's going to continue chopping sideways. Though I wouldn't be surprised to see Bitcoin in the lower half of the 80 handle at some point here by the time we get to summer. If you understand how Bitcoin's logarithmic supply generates an exponential demand curve, you would be on board with the HODL strategy for Bitcoin and acquiring as much Bitcoin as possible. You know, I've been on the Bitcoin trade and on the Bitcoin trend and on Bitcoin since 2013. So I have no doubt Bitcoin will be worth an insane amount of money in the future. But right now, there are issues with hardware. Because of the demand from AI right now, spiking prices for memory chips, for manufacturing time at all of these manufacturing plants, it's making it increasingly difficult for companies that want to produce ASICs to produce them. So all the mining hardware is getting more expensive, and with the drop that has happened in Bitcoin here, right? This has significantly hurt the profitability of many, many, many miners. So some miners are potentially going to go out of business if we stay effectively also below 80 or 90,000, especially below 90,000. A decent number of miners will stay out of business because they take on all these loans and they take on all the debt, and they assume Bitcoin will be a particular price, will hold above some particular price. And then when Bitcoin falls through that price, and it stays below that price for several months, they go out of business. And then other companies are able to step in, acquire their hardware, and also acquire effectively the rewards, the mining rewards for their hash rate. Excuse me, gotta sneeze. So I am really not concerned about Bitcoin in the long run, but in the short run, a lot of companies, a lot of crypto companies that are doing especially proof of work mining for Bitcoin are probably having a difficult time accounting wise financially a bit here. But so many people believe in Bitcoin that I genuinely believe if you have a good sales team, you really shouldn't be having a problem getting the money to cover your bills to continue mining. Want to do. Let's see here. The AI craze made such a big backlog that the approximate time where orders would be fulfilled is 2028. Yes, that's right, because these AI companies, they wanted so much of the production from the big three memory chip producers. I know Micron's in there, Crucial's in there. Well, Crucial is the retail brand, and I'll just say I am not prepared to talk in depth about that at the moment, but I know it's going on. Generally, it's been a while since I've gone into the exact specifics of what companies are doing what exactly. What worries me right now is the implementation into military equipment, which could also influence this deadline. Yes. There was the whole thing with Sam Altman and Anthropic. I remember that. Yeah. From what I understand, because I was waiting before casting judgment on the U.S. military for making these demands of Anthropic, I wanted to wait for the government to actually give a comment on what they were so concerned about and why they were pushing Anthropic to let their AI be used in military applications. And from what I understand, the primary concern from the government for military uses is that the AI would object. So you would tell the AI to do something, and then the AI would object or subvert you while you're conducting a military operation, which could cost people's lives. And apparently, there were these quote-unquote AI strategists or components of the mission to get Maduro in Venezuela. Part of that actually used some component or some piece of that mission. We don't know specifics of what was AI, but apparently Anthropic's AI was a part of that mission. Imagine putting an AI into intelligence, artificial intelligence into intelligence. Well, that kind of just sounds like biological brains. hooked up to computers. You're making computers out of biological parts. And there are people actually doing explicitly that. They're trying to take brain tissue and grow it in such a way where you can utilize it like a computer. And it's gross looking. It's a meat computer. You know, we're all technically meat computers, but this is like literally a computer made out of meat. We don't know if it technically has a soul or not. For all intents and purposes, it could just be for all intents and purposes, it could just be a homunculus. Yeah, something that goes no you, right? Yeah, you do not want the fucking no you, you're gay AI, where you give in a military operation an AI an order and it says no you and you're gay. You're trying to execute this very, very serious, very, very important mission for national security, and the AI is just calling you gay. I keep changing keyboards and pressing enter too early. Yep. Thankfully, I'm not doing that. I have been using the same keyboard for a very long time, but it's also a mechanical keyboard, and it has lasted me a long time, as I expected it to. But on the AI side of things, on the AI supply side of things, a lot of the big manufacturers for computer components, they did get all these companies explicitly to sign 2-year supply agreements because they were asking for so much of their supply that they wanted the security with really rock solid contracts. They wanted the security that these companies were not going to bail on them. If they said that they were going to purchase and buy and invest in their companies to get all these computer components, well, they wanted really rock solid funding commitments, to say the least. And so now all those companies have those agreements, and they are totally willing to do that work because they are going to be paid phenomenally well for those agreements. I keep changing. Yeah, sorry. New notification showed up for. I don't know why that happened. And the build out that's happening now over the next 2 years to accommodate supply is also going, once it's up and running, past 2026, like you said. That's when it's expected that all this extra manufacturing capability will come online, and then the prices will start to go down because they will continue building more stuff. It's just the first set of new production facilities will come online in 2028, supposedly, and they're already investing for the next. Effectively, they're planning for already. I don't know if they're already investing in it, but they're definitely planning for where do they build the next set of factories after the ones in 2028 are complete, so they can kind of do one step after another step after another step of stepping up production significantly over the next decade. So then the cost of these chips come back down, because right now things are definitely incredibly expensive. Let's see here. Litecoin, not doing a whole lot here. Just kind of hanging out. XRP, Sol, yeah, nothing going on the, on the crypto side of things. How about gold? Again, I still think gold is going to do just fine. Gold moved down after Operation Epic Fury, stayed sideways, and now that the Strait of Hormuz is opening and ships are loading cargo in the Persian Gulf, dollar is weakening, gold is going up. Incredibly straightforward. Incredibly straightforward. That's uranium. Not much to really see there other than it got hit by Operation Epic Fury. We can look at equities. Big fat rebound in the S&P. Big fat rebound here. Huge gap down and then bounce back in the NASDAQ. And a bounce in the Dow. And a bounce in Japan. And a bounce in the UK. And a bounce in Europe. And a bounce in France. And a bounce in Germany. And a bounce in Japan. And a bounce. No bounce in New Zealand. And a bounce in Australia. So all of these global equity markets all had bounces with the fall in oil on the release of the first bit of oil into the Gulf, getting past the Strait of Hormuz. It's starting to look good. The short term, things look promising, but things can flip on a dime. All you need are one or two boats attacked by drones from Iran. For whatever reason, they don't like the cut of the jib of the captain on the ship. He looked a little too American. We blew up your ship. You look a little too American. We thought you were American, so we blew up your ship. You have that happen to a handful of ships. The insurance companies are going to send premiums sky high again, and you will see all of these assets that had wonderful rebounds today claw back those rebounds in that situation. So being informed quickly matters, and that's why I always recommend that people use a Squawk chat. Now we have one in Discord. So if we go to Discord over here and we zoom in, I got one unread message. You can see this news feed chat, and you can see this is financial juice, but it's via Discord. So you can set up Discord notifications for this, allow yourself to receive notifications for this, and then whenever there is something that comes down the wire here that's very useful or important, for example, live streams with world leaders get announced and linked. You can stay up to date on stuff. In a geopolitical risk situation where geopolitics are the main driving force for a market, you need to be on top of a Squawk. And that's what this is. Stay on top of the Squawk. And I'm just trying to zoom out. I'll go ahead and say thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you, Ani, and thank you, Ari, for hopping in. I will see you guys definitely on Discord, hopefully in the research channels that we have over there. If you are new and watching this for the first time, if you've watched all the way through, thank you very much. You can come hang out with us in the Discord. The link to that is in the WAP link. Just go in there, click on Join Free Discord, and then you'll be in with us and you can ping and say hi. So with that all said and done, been your boss, Joe Boss. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you all